This also does not look to be on film.
Okay, go ahead. No, go right ahead. Oh, which door?
I don't know. Raise your right hand. Give promise that the testimony you're about to give in this matter before the court is the entire truth and nothing else.
I do.
Please be seated.
Good morning. And is it Deputy Atterbury?
Deputy Edwards. No.
Would you spell your name, say your name and spell your last name for the court record?
It's Atterbury, A-T-T-E-B-E-R-Y.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a deputy sheriff for the King County Sheriff's Office
And how long have you been deputy sheriff?
for a little over 2 years.
Okay. And have you worked anywhere else as a law enforcement officer prior to that?
No, I did not.
Okay. What kind of training did you have for your current position?
I went to the academy for 440 hours. We had 3 months where we rode with another officer, field training officer program. We were also supervised for 6 months. We had a direct supervisor who reviewed all your paperwork and went to your calls and such to verify that you were doing a proper job.
Deputy Jackson, can you just a little more
yes,
toward the
ma'am.
microphone? Thank you.
Did you have any specific training with regard to the WTO effort?
Yes, ma'am.
So what kind of training did you have for that?
We had 3 8-hour training days prior to W2O.
What kind of things were you trained on during that time?
We were trained on, as far as forming skirmish lines, marching, basically how to deploy, how to position our cars when we're in cars, doing deployment. There was baton training, the proper ways to strike somebody. We had some defensive tactics training, reference, grabbing handholds and such, detaining people.
Now, let me turn your attention to November 30th of '99. Were you asked to respond to downtown Seattle to assist?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and did you know why you were going down, what you were going down to do?
It was reference to the W2O meeting. They expected a large group of people, basically crowd control.
What time did you go down to downtown Seattle that day?
6 in the morning, I believe.
Do you recall being asked to go to 5th and Union at about that afternoon?
I'll say yes. I really don't know exactly the address or the cross streets on where we were deployed that day.
Can you tell me a little bit then about what were you asked to do that afternoon of the 30th?
Well, I remember that we were told that there was a group of officers that were having trouble handling the crowd and we need to back up another group of officers, King County deputies.
And when you responded, what did you observe?
I observed a large group of people, I guesstimate 1,000 people, that were being held by a group of our King County deputies on the street. They basically had formed a line across the street, building to building, basically just standing their ground as the crowd was, I guess, milling behind them.
How many deputies would you say there were?
Before my team actually...
with your team responding, total?
I'm going to say 45.
So you didn't have an equal number of officers and civilians?
Object, Your Honor.
I can rephrase the question, Your Honor. Rephrase the question.
Was there an equal number then of officers and civilians at that location?
No, not even close.
When you responded, what position did you take in response to the line?
I took basically a secondary position, so there was the front line that was directly in front of the crowd, and then I was actually probably about 10 feet behind the front line, and what they call the linebacker position.
Linebacker.
So,
what were you asked to do as a linebacker? What were your duties?
basically, I was to assist the line if they needed a hole filled up, someone had to go to the bathroom. Also, if there was an arrest to be made, we were the people to make the arrest, so therefore the line wouldn't have a gap as those people attended to whoever needed to be attended to.
At any point, as you served as, I guess, a linebacker, were you required to respond to a situation that erupted on the line?
Yes, I was.
What type of situation did you respond to?
Well, I was, I guess, towards the middle of the line, and I saw that there was an individual that was very adamant about needing to go through the line. I mean, his body language and his voice separated him from everybody in the crowd, where I thought there was going to be a potential problem. So I, therefore, maneuvered over to where those officers, the line officers that were in front of that individual were.
When you say you maneuvered over, what direction on the line was that?
It was, it would be to the west of the line. So I maneuvered, I guess, to the left, if I was facing forward.
And what did you observe about the individual at that point?
Well, I observed that the individual seemed very angry. He was insistent that he felt he needed to go through the line, that it wasn't proper that we were blocking the passageway.
I don't. All right. Saying this to the very last part and the last part of the statement is taken.
And am I allowed to inquire as to his observation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Officer, before I ask you more questions, can you identify that individual that you saw on the line that day in the courtroom now?
The individual with the white shirt and the tie on.
Thank you. When you said you observed this individual as angry, what in your observations led you to the conclusion that he was angry? What did you notice about his body?
He had a raised voice. His fists were clenched. And he was, I would call it a bladed stance. Therefore, his one foot was positioned probably at a 45-degree angle from his back foot.
Can you demonstrate that?
Oh, sure.
And if you want to describe what you're demonstrating so the court record can pick it up.
So it would be like this.
And, okay, thank you, officer. Now, what significance does a bladed stance have, or what did you notice about
Well,
that?
through my experience, that if you're going to engage in battle with somebody, that would be the optimum position normally. And we're trained in the academy also that if someone is going to, if they position themselves in that fashion, they're more inclined to be aggressive, or there could be a fight that they're...
And did you notice anything about the defendant's facial expressions or his stare or eyes at that point?
He seemed very angry. I mean, he was adamant about needing to go through the line. I remember he just specifically stared directly at, it seemed like all the officers. He'd look at you, and it was like they called it a 1,000-mile stare, where he just seemed to be looking through you. And it wasn't I'm making eye contact because I'm talking to you. It was more of a, I'm staring at you because I want to fight you. I want to go there.
Again, this was his observations, not with his... You can continue what you're saying.
Okay, I don't know if I have any more to say reference that. So.
Thanks. So now, once you noticed the defendant taking this stance and this stare, what did you do?
I just stood behind the line and just, it wasn't up to me to say anything. I was just basically a secondary role in case something happened. So
did you observe the situation?
Did I observe?
Did you just stand back and observe the situation?
Exactly.
Okay. How long would you say you observed the situation?
It went on for a few minutes. The exact time frame I don't know, but it was more than a few seconds. I'll tell you that. So.
Now, was the defendant already there in front of officers when you responded?
Yes, he was.
Okay. Did you notice the defendant's demeanor change during that time that you watched from behind the line?
Did you say something? I'm sorry. Did he notice whether it's overruled?
The defendant seemed to become more and more agitated as time went on.
And what makes you say that he was more agitated?
Well, at first he was very loud and aggressive in his stance and his posture as far as clenching his fist. And towards the end, before we actually any physical confrontation whatsoever, he was literally shaking. I mean, I could see him just like he could control himself shaking.
As you observed this escalation, what happened next?
At that point, the defendant proceeded to try to walk through the line, and there was a like split between the two deputies that were holding the front line. Basically, put his arms out and tried to walk through and push him alongside and walk through the line.
And what happened when this occurred?
At that point, a deputy pepper foamed the defendant.
And what happened when the defendant had
Well, he was foamed in the facial region. At that point, he stepped back and paused for a second, and then he proceeded to lunge at the line, just flailing his arms, and like a swimming motion like that. So.
And what happened after he began to do this?
At that point, Deputy Sutherland, I remember, who was standing alongside me, went through the line and grabbed the defendant and grabbed him and pulled him on our side of the line through the deputies.
Well, let me ask you, before I ask you what happened next, when the defendant was initially, you said you observed for the defendant was looking at the officers and taking a stance, how was the crowd responding to the defendant's actions? Or did you observe how the crowd was responding?
I remember specifically that there was one individual that said, "Hey, you need to mellow out," to him, and the defendant turned around and said, "Hey, you need to mind your own business."
Okay. And did the defendant seem to have any other interaction with the crowd?
No, I don't remember any other conversation between the defendant and anybody else.
Was there anyone else, I guess, with the defendant at that point, yelling at officers or getting in the officer's face, or was the defendant by himself?
There was nobody specifically with the defendant. There was other incidents in the crowd where there was people being confrontational.
Okay. And then after he was pulled through the line, what happened next?
At that point, I went on one side of him and I grabbed his shoulder and arm, and I was trying to push him to the ground. And I remember that we walked for probably maybe 5 feet, because it didn't seem like he wanted to go to the ground. As I was pushing him down, he was walking forward. And then we ended up actually going to the ground, and I was working on trying to get one of his arms out from underneath him because they were tucked underneath.
And why were you trying to get his arms out?
Because we were going to handcuff him.
How many officers were involved in getting the defendant to the ground?
I'm going to say 3, at least 3. I'm not sure on the exact amount. At that point, I was just focused on my half of him, trying to get his arm out.
I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Good morning. No. Yes, I did. Roughly a week after that happened. Yes, that's correct. Some of those police. No, that's not correct. When I viewed the tape, there was 2 other deputies with me, but they were not involved in this incident.
Waiting outside and coming to testify this morning, correct?
I'm sorry, could you...
You've been waiting outside, not a long period of time, but to be called.
That is correct.
There's another office.
Yes, that is correct.
My understanding of your testimony was that you were another group were called to.
Yeah, he doesn't know how Mr. Larson was taken to the ground, and then to supplement that in court testimony, saying, "Oh yeah, an officer took him to the ground, and I know who
Well,
did that.
was the taken to the ground suggests that a police maneuver?
Yeah.
They used a lot of different maneuvers. Was he talking about he didn't know what maneuver was used, or is he saying he didn't know how he landed on the ground? I'm not clear.
The latter, Your Honor. He's saying to the investigator he didn't know how he landed on the ground. He said he may have, somebody may have guided, or he fell to the ground on his own.
And here he said, you believe he said he was taken to the ground. Is that correct? Did
By
you
an
give him an opportunity to clear that up during cross-examination? I don't
I
recall
believe I
that.
did. I did ask him whether somebody took him to the ground.
You have to go further than that, Mr. Egan. You can't just ask him a question. You have to then go say, do you recall talking to the investigator? Do you recall telling her X, Y, Z? The officer says yes or no. If he says yes, then you're finished. If he says no, then you can call the investigator to impeach him. That's how the rule works. I'm looking,
I asked him a number of times whether he recalled talking to the investigator
yes, but I said that's not enough.
and whether he'd made different statements to the investigator.
Mr. Egan, I'm going to hold to, I still told you yesterday I was going to be very strict on both parties. And, rather than give the kind of leeway I did in terms of, leading questions and things like that. But, and kind of, the line of relevance with respect to people being able to get their theories out. But I am not going to bend the rules in this instance. I told you that there's no, and I wouldn't bend the rule in this instance anyway. It's a clear rule. There's a reason for the rules we have. All right. Anything else? I want to give you every opportunity if there is something. If you did allow the opportunity for the witness to, I will allow it. But I just don't want to go through this in front of the jury. So if you need a few minutes to look at your papers, that's fine. We can do that. Go off the record, Madam Clerk. Let me know when you're ready. Let's bring in the jury.
Please rise. You may be seated.
Thank you. All right. Defense will call the first witness.
Yes, defense will call Lisa Hanna to the stand.
Testimony. It is witness chair.
Would you introduce yourself and spell your last name?
My name's Lisa Hanna. The last one is spelled Hanna.
And
Might have to scoot just a little closer to the microphone. Thank you.
what is your current position?
I'm an investigator with Northwest Defenders Association.
Is that a law firm that represents somebody in court today?
Yes, it is. It's a public defense law firm that is representing Eric Larson.
Do you see Eric Larson in the court today?
Yes, I do.
Have you had training in interviewing techniques?
Yes, I have.
Can you explain that training for me?
I was a police officer for 5 years. I also received a Bachelor of Arts degree from Central Washington University in Law and Justice. In addition, I've had ongoing training with Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission in hostage negotiations and advanced interviewing techniques.
Where were you a police officer?
Ellensburg, Washington.
Approximately how many statements or interviews have you taken in the course of your police work?
I wouldn't be able to give you an exact number. It would be hundreds and hundreds.
How many have you taken in the course of your work with the agency?
Several hundred.
How do you typically write those statements?
As I'm interviewing a witness, I will take notes, contemporaneous notes, and then do a report shortly thereafter.
What's important? What kinds of questions do you ask that are important in an interview?
It depends on the case, obviously, but witnesses, descriptions, dates,
Your
times,
Honor,
places.
I apologize for interrupting. I'm going to object to the relevance of this question.
Overruled. Go ahead, you can finish answering the question.
Dates, times, places, witnesses, descriptions of people, descriptions of evidence, basically the facts that occurred as they occurred from the perspective of the witness.
Is accuracy important in this case?
Very important.
In this case, did you have an opportunity to interview detectives or officers, or deputies involved in the charge with Mr. Lewis?
Yes, I did.
Did you have an opportunity to speak with Detective Paul Klein?
Yes, I did.
And who is Detective Paul Klein?
Detective Paul Klein is a detective with the King County Sheriff's Office.
And you interviewed him after reviewing any notes that he'd written, or how did you approach the interview?
Well, I had trouble getting a hold of Detective Klein, so I made a phone call to the prosecutor. And
I'm going to object to the relevance of this.
Well, I don't think
Getting
that was
into
the
this.
question. Why don't you redirect your witness, please?
When you finally reached Detective Klein, what did you first discuss?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to relevance. Counsel needs to ask about the topic in question rather than just my
Sustained.
background.
I guess my question is, what was the subject of your discussion?
the subject of my discussion was the arrest of Eric Larson.
And when you asked him what time he showed up, did you ask him that question?
Yes, I did.
Why did you ask that question?
I
Your Honor,
asked,
I'm going to object to relevance. The only thing that's relevant here is the actual question and answer.
Sustained.
And Ms. Hanna, what time did the officer or Detective Paul Klein say he arrived on Tuesday?
Detective Klein told me that he arrived Tuesday at approximately 6 a.m.
Did he say 10 a.m.?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to asked and answered.
No further questions.
The objection sustained on other grounds. All right. Any cross-examination?
Ms. Hanna, well, you mentioned earlier, first of all, that you had a little trouble getting a hold of Detective Klein. How long did you try to get a hold of him?
I tried throughout the day. We had received in the morning information from, I believe, your office via email that...
So just throughout one day, you tried to get hold of him? Okay.
Right.
How long have you worked for NDA?
Almost 2 years.
And isn't the purpose of your taking statements and doing these investigations to prepare for criminal cases?
Yes.
And isn't the purpose of taking these statements to monitor the later testimony of witnesses?
Monitor testimony?
Is part of your purposes. Is part of your purpose to compare that to later testimony that they give in court?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. You don't, not, I can rephrase it if it's confusing.
No, I think I understand what you're asking. Because I'm not in the courtroom and I'm not allowed to hear what the witnesses say, obviously it's hearsay and it would be irrelevant to me.
Okay. Are you testifying from, you mentioned that you take notes and you generate a report. Are you testifying only from your memory of what was said by Detective Klein?
I'm testifying from memory and from my notes and my report.
Okay, and you said you take notes and then you write a report. Do you review your notes or the report with the witness that you talk to?
If there's a question, I review my notes as well.
Do you review it with the person to give them an opportunity to clarify anything?
If there's time prior to trial, and if there was a question prior to trial, I would probably speak to them again.
Did you review any notes that you made in interviewing? Did you make any notes in interviewing Detective Klein?
Yes, I did.
And did you review those notes with Detective Klein?
No.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further.
All right, any recross?
Yeah,
Redirect, I'm sorry.
Miss Hannah, when did you speak with Detective Klein?
At approximately 4 p.m. on the 7th.
You said you were writing handwritten notes at that time?
Yes, I was.
When did you take those notes and put them into a typewritten document?
Immediately after I had the interview.
On that day?
Yes.
And is the purpose to provide that information to the defense counsel?
Yes, it is.
I have no further questions.
All right, anything further from the city for
No,
Ms.
Your Honor.
Hannah? Thank you, Ms. Hannah. You may sit down. Since may call its next witness.
We'd be amenable to breaking for lunch now.
Is that a request?
That is a request.
All right. I guess the question is, well, we excuse this jury, what we'll have to figure out is whether we're going to come back early or whether we're going to take our regular time. I know sometimes people are expecting us to be from 12 to 1:30, make arrangements, so we'll check to see if there's any conflict, if we can come back early, or whether, no, in fact, what we'll do is we'll tell the jury 1:30, I have some work for you all to do, so, okay, so you'll be back at 1:30. Please rise. Which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Of course.